Hello, my name is Christopher Scott from the Biblical Leadership blog at christopherscottblog.com, and today I'm talking to you about how you can keep your best volunteers by providing training and ongoing professional development. So let's go ahead and get started in the material. This is some of the material that I've used when I've taught workshops for the Center for Nonprofit Management in Dallas and Fort Worth. So usually I'll spend a day talking about how to recruit volunteers. Then I'll spend the day talking about how to lead volunteers. And the final day, the third day, we spend talking about how to keep volunteers. And this is one of the things that I teach people to do, is that if you want to keep the best volunteers you have, a way to do that is by providing them training and ongoing professional development. And the reason you want to do that, number one, is because there is a transition of motivations that volunteers have for why they volunteer. For example, when people begin to volunteer, they want to make a difference in society and an organization at the beginning, right? When they want to start volunteering, it's because they want to make a difference in society and an organization. However, research shows that over time, volunteers continue volunteering because of the personal connections they make and the personal growth that they experience as a result of volunteering. So if you want to keep those volunteers long term, you need to make sure you help them grow in the process by providing training and professional development. So that's why you want to give training and development for volunteers, because it will keep them there, because that's their motivation of volunteers that stay longer. Another reason is that volunteers desire ongoing training, right? As volunteers start volunteering and start serving, they're going to encounter new experiences, new things, new clients, new situations, maybe that they didn't think about, or maybe that they weren't trained for originally. So volunteers that want to do a good job and want to serve are going to want that ongoing training, so you need to give it to them so that they feel like they're doing a good job. I know when I was working at the United Way and I helped to lead our Campaign Coordinators Council, which was a group of volunteers, we experienced some really good meetings when we started providing training to them about how they could do a better job. So in the past, we kind of would meet, get them together, talk about things happening, get their feedback, but then we had a volunteer named Jim Jesse who offered to help us train the campaign coordinators. So instead of meeting and talking about what we were doing, we would let Jim kind of do some training with them, and we got to see our meetings increase as far as how many people came, and the amount of participation and interaction that occurred was the best when we were giving training to those volunteers. So you want to make sure you do training, because that's the motivations of volunteers, and it's what they need and what they're going to want to come to learn more about doing their well. So when you do start to do trainings, you want to communicate them in many forms, right? People learn in a variety of different ways. You want to communicate it in writing, in formal trainings if you can, in your evaluations and coaching meetings with volunteers. Do it in the little huddles you might have before the volunteer experiences happens. If you're giving feedback on the spot to volunteers, communicate training then. Whenever you can, try to always communicate training. Maybe if you have volunteers that serve in more delicate roles where they interact with clients that are suicidal or women who have been battered, things like that. Maybe you give training when you meet one-to-one with those volunteers every year to check in, or in the counseling sessions you might do with your volunteers, things like that. So those are the reasons you want to do volunteer training, ongoing and professional development, as well as how to do it whenever you can. The last thing I want to leave you with is that you don't want to let training get in the way, right? So you're a busy person, you lead volunteers, there's lots of things you got to get done. It's okay to let volunteers start working up front, maybe without the training they need, if you know you can kind of get that volunteer training to them over time, long term, right? Within reason, depending on what jobs they're doing. So don't make it super formal where volunteers have to sit through a 4-hour training just so they can go into your food bank and put cans of corn with other cans of corn, okay? You don't need to do training for that. Just let them go do it. Don't let training get in the way. It's a tool to keep your best volunteers long term, and to keep them around if they're going to keep volunteering. And it's a way to make sure you're providing for their needs, but don't overuse the tool. It's a tool. So I appreciate you tuning in. My name is Christopher Scott from the Biblical Leadership blog at christopherscottblog.com. If you're interested to learn more about leading volunteers for nonprofit organizations or churches, you can go to my website at christopherscottblog.com and learn more there. Thanks again for tuning in.